Hello and welcome to accessibility training. In this video, I will show you accessibility tips so you can make your page more accessible. I'll be going over the different types of headings you can add to your page, how to insert a photo the correct way so it is accessible, how to add links so they are accessible, and how to add the accordion snippet so it's more accessible on your page, along with other accessibility tips. The first thing I'm going to go over is headings. As you see on my page right here, I have a few different headings laid out. We're going to be actually adding more information to this page, so disregard some of the image and link text right here. So rule of thumb is whenever adding headings to a page, it's somewhat of a navigation for the content on your page. So for example, my page right here is about accessibility training, so this is the first item at the top of the page, so I'm going to give it a heading 1. We're never going to have more than one heading 1 on a page, and you're never going to have a heading 3 after a heading 1. We always want to keep them in order from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I have never seen a page go that far as having heading 6, but you can do that. That's a good way to sort information. Most commonly, I see anywhere from heading 3 maybe to heading 4, if that. As you see on my page, I have heading 1 right here, and we're going to be adding photos, which relates to this heading right here, so I gave it a heading 2, but I also have a few other heading 2s right here because they still relate to this heading 1 right here. As you see, I have accordions also. I'm still going to be talking about the different types of accessibility for that, so that's going to be below my heading 1. And as you see, it's labeled heading 2 with some information there, but I'll be going over that later. And finally, I transition to a heading 3. It still pertains to the other information. And as you see, I have a heading 3 here. It still pertains to the other information before it. So this is why I transitioned to a heading 3, because it's not on the same level as these headings right here, but it still pertains to the information that all leads back to heading 1, which is accessibility training. In some instances, there may be a component that is requiring you to put it in a certain place, such as the accordion item. Every accordion heading is going to default to a heading 3, and I'll go more in depth with that later on, but I'm going to add an example to the page that is already going to contain a heading 1, and you will no longer be needing to add a heading 1 to your page because the component already serves as a heading 1. I'm going to go to the edit view right here. And just as an example, I'm just going to give myself some space, and I'm going to go to the component, and I'm going to search for it really quick, section intro. And as you see with the help text below it, please use this component only once at the beginning of the page. So what this means is that this is going to be the H1 of the page, so I'm just going to add just regular text for right now. I'm just going to copy paste this so we see what this looks like. I'm going to click save, and I'm going to save the page. So technically I have two heading 1s, which this should not ever happen on a page. But as you see, this is heading 1, and this is also heading 1. So if I were to use this particular component, what I would have to do is I would have to delete this heading 1 and not use it. And after this component, I could then use heading 2s, 3s, and 4s, and so on. So that's just an example of how some components and even some snippets have different heading rules. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to get rid of this and return this block up and move forward with the training. Another helpful tool while in the edit mode to see all the different headings and paragraph text you have is going to be the show blocks option. And that's going to be in the toolbar, the bottom row next to your snippet. So when I hover over it, it reads show blocks. When I click on it, you'll see that the page does change and there is some outlines around all the text. So here you could see it reads H1, letting me know this is the H1. Here it has a P, letting me know that this is paragraph text. Here is H2, letting me know this is heading 2, paragraph, and so on. So as I scroll down to the bottom of the page, it is really helpful to see all the different types of headings and paragraphs on the page. So I would recommend when you're not too sure, you could toggle this on and off. And don't worry about it because it's actually not going to show when you publish or save anything. This is only viewable in the edit mode. Since we're in the edit mode, what I'll be going over now is how to add photos to the page. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to properly add an image to this column right here, as it should be when we're trying to make it accessible. So I'm going to delete this text, go browse for my images, and here is the photo. And here's where we have to have something in this box right here. The alternative description is what the assistive technology is going to read out loud to a user when it gets to that particular photo. For example, if someone is blind, they're not going to be able to see the photo, so they're going to be using some sort of technology for them to read what's on the page out loud to them. They won't be able to see the photo, so this is where this alternative description comes into play. So when that technology goes to that photo, it's going to read this out loud. So we want to try to be as descriptive as we can. Of course, we're not going to put a whole paragraph in there, but maybe a sentence of just what is happening in the photo. For example, I don't know exactly what's happening in this photo, but I'm just going to take a guess because it was taken at Fresno State. And I assume from all the events that happen year-round, I'm just going to take a guess of what it is. And I think it's Safari Day, so I'm just going to add some information like that. And I have that copy and pasted right here. So what I added was students at Safari Day meeting with vendors and clubs. And I'm going to click Save. And now my photo is inserted in the page. So here's my photo, and you don't see the text, it's invisible text. As I mentioned, the technology is actually going to read everything on the page, and it's going to navigate from the different headings. So this is why headings are important. So it's going to go to that heading 1 first, and then it's going to go down to like the paragraph text and the heading 2 and so on. So this is why we stress about keeping them in order from 1 through 6. So now I have my information right here. Perfect. Now what I'm going to do is, we totally understand you want to put information of the photo or what's happening in the photo. So that's what I'm going to do. I am going to add Safari Day right here, do a return. Then I'm actually going to add some other information as the date and the time and just a little body text of what you would want to do. Of course, you're going to put this on a real page. I just have these two columns just to separate the good example and the bad example. So once again, everything on the left side is going to be a good example. Everything on the right side is going to be a bad example. So I have all that right there. And yes, I am going to style this. And to keep things in mind, since this is a heading 2, I'm going to set this to a heading 2 also, just for this example. So here we go. And we recommend, if you do want to emphasize text, what you could do is make it bold. Instead of using a heading, you just make it bold like that, just to emphasize some text if you like. I'm going to leave that text as is, but we do have other options. So if I want, I can make it italic, underline, and so on. But I'm going to leave this as is, and there is my information right there. And I'm going to save that just to see what that looks like. And once again, this is just a training. You will have more room in your actual website environment, but I'm just doing this so I could separate the good example from the bad example. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a bad example. So I'm going to put it on this right side, delete, and I'm going to go navigate to my photos and grab that example. And here we go. So for the alternative description, as I mentioned, we want to be descriptive. When we do our accessibility scans across the Fresno State website, we always come across images that do not have a great alternative description. So for example, I'm just going to place students here, which, yes, this is true. Students are in the photo, but this is not descriptive for someone who is using assistive technology. So I'm going to save this. And as you see, I have a cool gradient on it. I have some text on it, which is great to some point, but in reality, a screen reader is not going to be able to read that text. It's only going to be able to read what we put on the alternative description text. So this is why it's very important that we take a majority of the text off, especially the important information, and actually place it on the page. This text will be picked up by a screen reader, while this text will not. So we want to be as descriptive as we can. Yes, you can have some text on a photo, but try not to have too much text on a photo. And then if you do have text on the photo, you probably want to put that in the alternative description. So for example, I'm just going to leave this as is. Okay, great. I have my photo. Anyone could read that text. I'm good. I'm going to save that. And as you see, as I mentioned before, a screen reader is not going to be able to read the text that's on this photo, but it will be able to read the text that's on the page. So as you see, I translated this information that was on the actual photo and I placed it on the page right here. So once again, when you're adding photos like this with text on it, try not to have too much text on the photo, such as a flyer. Yes, I totally understand we place flyers on pages and whatnot, but whenever you can, probably just crop out the most important information, maybe the call to action photo or maybe the flashy photo that's on the flyer, and have the information on the flyer placed as text on the page. Because once again, this is how someone's going to be able to navigate and listen to the text that's read out loud versus what's on a photo. Now what I'm going to go over are links on a page. We may not think of links being as something for accessibility, but they truly are somewhat the same information as adding the alternative description. Whenever we add a link to a page, we could kind of hide where it's actually linking to. We could highlight text and we could place any link we want under that text and the user will not know. So whenever we add a link, we actually want to be descriptive of what's under that link when we're adding buttons or even just highlighting. So I'm actually going to add some information to this page and I'll show you the difference between what should be there and what shouldn't be there. So now what we have here are links. So as I mentioned before, anything on the left column is going to be the correct way. Everything on the right side is going to be try not to add this to the page. So as I mentioned before, links should be descriptive, similar to how photos should be descriptive. So for example, on the left side, I have the heading with my information of what it is, and I have the target right here. It reads Explore CSU and Fresno State Policies, and if I were to click this, I'm going to right click, open a new tab. It's going to take me to all the CSU and Fresno State policies. That's great. And then below that, if this were on the same page, I have another heading right here with more information below that, but I also have another target right here. This reads Learn More Data Storage Guidelines, and it does go to a different page. So this is the correct way to do it. As you've seen, I have two targets on my page. What I mean by target is two different links. This could be a text that I actually highlight or using a button or anything like that. They go to different links, and they also have different text that is descriptive of what you're going to. Yes, it's going to be a little lengthy, but this is how we add accessibility to our page. Now to the right side. I have the same heading and body copy right here, but as you see, it just reads Read More. I have the same heading, body copy on this side, and it still says Read More. So this is not the correct way to do it. The reason why is because Read More, yes, I do have a heading and I do have some information about it, but what exactly is the user going to see when they click on this item? And if this were the same page, having Read More 2 times, that is a no-no. So you want to be descriptive on each link as I mentioned before. You definitely don't want to have the same link twice or more on one page. If you're going to be linking to a page, you only want to link to it one time and not multiple times. So just to wrap up, what you want to do is make sure that the links are descriptive and try not to replicate the same text for all the links over and over. Some examples of things you shouldn't add are click here, read more, more information, things like that. If you do want to add something like that, please emphasize of what you're going to learn more about or read more about. So for example, I would put read more about CSU Fresno State policies, read more about data storage guidelines. As I have over here, I could be a bit creative. I have Explore, CSU, Fresno State policies, learn more data storage guidelines. So that's what you want to do when you're adding links to buttons or even just adding links to text. Please be descriptive. This is what a screen reader is going to read out loud also. And this is just a good habit to have because, for example, I could potentially link to a malicious website under one of these items. This is another item that comes up when we do accessibility searches that always gives us an error all the time. And I'm going to be talking about accordions. As I mentioned before, there is particular items that do have options for selecting the different type of heading. Unfortunately, accordions do not, but just keep in mind that each heading you have on the page is going to be an automatic heading 3. So what that means, be sure to place them after a heading 2 or a heading 3 so it's on the same level. So for example, if I go back into the edit mode, I could see the different headings I have on my accordion. Of course, this is just a example accordion, so I just placed automatic heading 3 right here. So anything you placed in this heading area is going to automatically take the role of a heading 3. And as you see up here, I have a heading 2, so this is perfectly fine. Or even if I converted this to a heading 3, this is going to be perfectly fine also because these are going to be the same level right here. So I'm going to actually convert this back to a heading 2, and I'm going to get out of the edit mode. So just keep in mind, whenever you're adding a accordion to the page, the heading is always going to be a heading 3. Keep that in mind. This information is actually going to be on our website, so you could always refer back to this training site to get a general idea of how to add accessibility items to the page, and we will definitely be adding any other information. Other accessibility tips, which is my heading 3, is all headings must be a minimum of 5 characters long. So this heading is fine, this heading is fine, of course that's more characters than 5. And this one is just right. So as you see, links, that is 5 characters, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that is fine. And finally, photos, accessibility. So all these are fine right here. Be sure when you're writing acronyms, I know Fresno State has tons of acronyms for different programs and whatnot. Please, when you're adding these items to the page, that you spell out the whole name first, and then you could actually use the acronym in different parts of the paragraph or stuff like that. And if the acronym is actually less than 5 characters, you're probably going to have to spell out the whole information because once again, it is an accessibility issue if it's not 5 characters long, and that's going to pop up in our scans, and when we see those issues pop up, then we're going to have to go in there and fix them. And another tip is use bold, italic, underline to emphasize text rather than using a heading. And heading should be thought as a navigation for the content on the page. So as I said in the beginning of this training, is think of your headings as a navigation of the content of your page. So this heading 1 is going to be what my page is about, accessibility training. And then I went over photos, I went over links, I went over accordions, and there was no other items I went over, but then I did transition to a heading 3, and here finally I just have other accessibility tips that we recommend. And just with anything else web related, if you have any questions about your website, about accessibility issues, feel free to reach out to us. We're more than happy to help and assist you with any of your needs. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions on anything related to your website or accessibility.